Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Marissa, an attorney with Legal Aid of North Carolina's Helpline. Today we have Megan Neal presenting for us. If you're unfamiliar with the format of this event, first, Megan is going to review a PowerPoint presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box on Zoom or the comments section on Facebook. We'll review all questions put in the chat boxes during the Q&A session at the end. Please remember that this is a public forum and legal aid is not representing you at this time. Megan will go over this in more detail, but please remember to keep your questions as general as possible, as we cannot provide any legal advice specific to your individual situation. This session will end when there are no more questions, and regardless of where we are, we will have a hard stop at 4:30 p.m. With all that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Megan to get us started.
Hey everyone, as Marissa said, I am Megan and I'm an attorney in Legal Aid's Greensboro office. And today I'm going to be talking to you about SSDI and SSI, and specifically we're going to be talking about applications and appeals for adult disability cases. So we are gonna first start by doing a little overview of eligibility for each program. Then we're going to talk about the application process, and then we're going to talk about the appeal process if your application is denied. So let's get started. So first, I want to just go over the general definition of disability in these cases, because these are disability-based benefits. And I have here the definition from the regulations, and I'll just read it to you now. Disability is the inability to do any substantial gainful activity by reason of any medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which can be expected to result in death, or which has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. So the way I would sort of translate or sum up that definition of disability is that you have to have a severe medical condition that prevents you from working on a competitive full-time basis. And so the way that plays out is kind of complicated, but I think we can just use that understanding of disability for the purposes of today. So there's kind of two different main programs for federal disability-based benefits. That's SSDI and SSI. And so both of these programs share that common definition of disability we just talked about, but there are also some differences between the two programs in terms of non-medical eligibility. So we'll kind of go through those now. So the first one is SSDI, stands for Social Security Disability Insurance. You might also hear it referred to as DIB, that's Disability Insurance Benefits. You might also hear it referred to as Title II benefits. And Title II is the name of the law that established this. So that's where that comes from, and you might specifically hear that Title II when you're talking to Social Security workers, people who are employed by the Social Security Administration. So the first difference to talk about is the amount of financial benefits that you might receive. So when you work, you pay into the SSDI system via the FICA tax. So the dollar amount you receive in SSDI benefits It's going to be based on a formula having to do with how much you've worked or how much you've paid into the system, how much you've earned, and how long you've been working. So everyone's SSDI amount is going to be different. The other main difference between the two programs, SSDI is not a means tested benefit. So if you otherwise qualify for SSDI, meaning if you meet that medical definition, you're going to qualify regardless of the amount of income or resources you currently have. This is really different from SSI. SSI is a means tested program, so we'll talk about that in a second. Two sort of important criteria for SSD is you have to be insured under their rules. That's a concept that's like a little bit too complex for today, but you have to be insured and you have to meet that disability definition. In terms of retroactivity, the onset date for your disability is important. So if your claim is successful, you're going to be able to get benefits starting 5 months after your disability onset date. But you also may not get benefits going back more than 1 year prior to the date of your application. And the final thing that's a little bit different about SSDI is that it's linked to Medicare. Once you've been receiving SSD for 24 months, you're going to be entitled to Medicare coverage. But note that because of that 5-month waiting period, that actually ends up being 29 months after your onset date. So now we're going to go to talk about SSI. SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income. You might also hear it referred to as Title 16 benefits. Again, you're going to hear that primarily when you're talking to Social Security workers, and that comes from the law that established the program. The amount of SSI that you are eligible to receive every month is set by the government every year. In North Carolina in 2025, that amount is $967 a month. And that amount can be further reduced if there's any income in the household, or if there are other forms of support from outside of the household. That's called in-kind support and maintenance. So again, unlike SSD, which is not a means tested program, SSI is a means tested program. So it's only available to folks who have really low income and low resources. The resource limit for a single person for SSI is $2,000. You can't have more than $2,000 in resources in order to be eligible for SSI. That's $3,000 for a couple. You have to be disabled, meaning that prior definition of disability we just talked about, or you have to be over 65. And so in terms of retroactivity for SSI, if you are determined medically eligible, you can receive benefits going back to the first of the month after the month that you applied. And when you get SSI, unlike SSD, which is linked to Medicare, SSI is linked to Medicaid. So those are kind of the the differences between the two main programs. And so now I want to talk just a little bit about like the different offices that are involved or that might be involved with your case as it goes through the processes. The Social Security Administration obviously is the kind of like overall federal agency. So then within that, there are the local field offices. Those are the offices, you might also hear it referred to as an FO, field office, LO, local office. Those are the local offices that you're going to be interacting with on a day-to-day basis. There's probably one, hopefully not too far away from you. There is a field office locator tool on the Social Security website. The website is ssa.gov. And you can just plug in your zip code and it will tell you the address of your local office and the fax number and the phone number. The DDS, Disability Determination Services, that's where your case gets sent for workup after you've applied. And they're the ones who are gonna be reviewing your medical record, sending you off to consultative examinations, and determining if you meet the definition of disability. And that office is located in Raleigh. Then we have the Office of Hearings Operations. It's abbreviated to OHO. These are the offices that hold and administer hearings. So if your case gets denied and you ultimately request an ALJ hearing, this is an office that is gonna schedule your case, and you can find the phone number for your hearing office also on the SSA website. And so the phone number will be there if you need to call them to request a copy of your file, or talk about scheduling or anything like that. And finally, we have the Appeals Council. This is the body of appeals judges that are in Falls Church, Virginia. This is the final level of administrative appeal. So if you have your hearing before an administrative law judge and you lose your hearing, you can appeal it to the Appeals Council, which you'll do by writing a letter to them and explaining what you think the errors in that the judge made in your case were. You're not going to go there in person because it's what we call a paper appeal. It's all going to be just like written down. And the Appeals Council is going to make their decision based just on the record and transcript and any written argument in the case. So now I want to just talk a little bit about the application process for these benefits. So if you think you might be eligible, of course, your first step is applying. You can apply for SSD online, but only certain applications for SSI can be filed online. So if you want to file for SSI, you're probably going to want to go to your field office and file your application there. You can also call your field office and tell them you want to file an application and they should help you with the next steps. The date that you call or otherwise tell them you want to file an application, that should be considered your protective filing date. And they should use that date as your application date. So there's, as part of the application process, there's going to be several forms that they're going to have you fill out. One of them is going to be a medical release form, so that they can request and obtain a copy of your medical records. And you're just going to want to pay close attention to the kinds of forms that they're asking you to fill out, and just to make sure to complete those completely and thoroughly. So after they start getting your medical records, they're gonna determine your non-medical eligibility. So that's things that we talked about earlier, like your income and resources for SSI, or your insured status for SSD. If they determine that you are non-medically eligible, your case is going to be sent then to the DDS in Raleigh, and then they're going to look at your medical records. These, of course, are going to be the records that you have told them about already. So again, you're going to want to make sure that you tell them all of your medical sources, all the medical treatment that you've received over the years. You might be sent to a medical appointment by them. That the medical appointment is called a consultative examination. So that's going to be one of Social Security's contracted doctors who are going to do an exam and evaluate your medical status. And then they're going to send your case to a medical consultant who will offer an opinion about whether you meet that definition of disability. And then after that, your file is going to be sent back to your local office, your field office. You'll get a notice in the mail saying whether your case has been approved or denied. So I have a chart here on the right-hand side. This is the most recent one I could find. This is for the fiscal year 2023, but here you can kind of see a visual representation of all the levels of appeal. So what we just talked about was the initial level. You can see that at the initial level, 39% of cases are allowed, meaning they're approved, and 61% are denied. So it's very common unfortunately, for cases to get denied at this initial level. So we're going to go through the chart kind of level by level so you can see why it is important for you. If you think you could be qualified for these benefits, it's important for you to keep appealing, because your best chance of winning is actually going to be at the ALJ level. So the first step, or I guess the second step, depending on how you look at it, but if your initial application is denied, your next step is going to be to request reconsideration. If you request reconsideration, your case is going to be sent back to that DDS that was evaluating your medical status, and different people from the first time around are going to review everything and issue a new decision. So kind of like a second set of eyes. You can see that at the reconsideration level, at least in fiscal year 2023, 85% of cases were denied at that reconsideration level. 15% of cases were approved. So if you think you're qualified, that tells you, that the next thing to do would be to appeal your, if you got denied, the next thing you would do would be to request an administrative law judge hearing, which is the next level. So the administrative law judge hearing is where you're going to appear either in person or phone or by online video. You're going to appear before an administrative law judge. So this is going to be your chance to make your case in person before a decision maker. The judge is going to review all of your medical records. And you'll have a chance to update your medical records. So if anything was missing at the prior levels, you can make sure to get those medical records or tell the office about those outstanding medical records. And the judge is going to review all that stuff. You can also submit other evidence. You'll give testimony. You can get doctor's opinions. You can have other witnesses come to your hearing to testify about your case. If you have a representative, that person can appear with you. There may also be what they call a vocational expert at this hearing. There could also be a medical expert at this hearing. You have the best chance, like I said, you have the best chance of winning at this level. So you can see 45% of cases are approved at this level. 24% are dismissed. That's most often when you don't appear to your hearing for whatever reason. And 30% of cases at this level are denied. So if you are unsuccessful at the hearing level, you can file a request for review to the appeals council, like we talked about earlier. Again, it's going to be a panel of 3 judges in Virginia, and they're going to be making a decision about your case just based on the record. As you can see here, only 1% of cases at this level are approved. 3% are dismissed. 13% are remanded. At the appeals council, we consider a remand also to be a win. With a remand, that means your case is going to be sent back to an administrative law judge to correct mistakes at the hearing and to do a new hearing. 83% of cases at the appeals council level are denied. And if you are unsuccessful at the appeals council level, you can file a complaint for judicial review in federal court. Here also in federal court, 1% of cases are allowed, 5% are dismissed, 61% are remanded. So again, we consider that a win. The case gets sent back to an administrative law judge to correct errors and to do a new hearing. 33% of cases at the federal court level are denied. Finally, I wanted to talk just about appeals deadlines. So if you're going through this process, you've applied, you need to appeal, you should just be aware of the different deadlines that can come up. The most important thing to do when you're working on your case is make sure to read the notices that Social Security sends you all the time. Importantly, these notices will give you the appeals deadlines. They'll tell you when you need to appeal. It might not be on the first page, it might be on the second page or the third page. But you're going to want to take the time to read everything they send you because they're going to be giving you important information about your rights. And just a sort of related tip is you want to make sure that Social Security has your correct contact info and especially your address. Because you want to make sure that you're getting these letters. They're really the most important thing. So the deadlines for medical eligibility cases, you generally have 60 days to appeal a denial. And so that's 60 days from the date that you receive the notice. Social Security allows 5 days for mailing. So if you look at the date on your notice, your true deadline is 65 days from the date on the notice. I always suggest don't wait for those 5 extra days. If you're going to appeal, do it as soon as possible. Do it within the 60 days. It's not something you want to chance. So for current beneficiaries, you can get aid pending the appeal. So your benefits to continue pending the appeal if you request an appeal within 10 days. For SSI non-medical cases, you actually have 60 days to get aid pending the appeal. But we're not talking about non-medical cases, we're just talking about medical cases today. So if you appeal late, I'll rephrase that. You can appeal late if you have good cause for late filing. So if you are appealing past the deadline, you're going to want to tell Social Security why you missed the deadline, and you're going to want to have a very good reason for doing so. A classic good cause reason would be if you were in the hospital for an extended period of time and you didn't get the denial notice in time because you were sick in the hospital. So you're just going to want to make sure that if you are appealing late, you're telling them your good reason for doing so. When you appeal, you can appeal on Social Security's website. That's the ssa.gov website. When you do that, you want to make sure to print or save the screen that comes up after you hit the submit button, because that's going to be your proof that you appealed timely. There can be times when Social Security loses appeals, so you want to make sure that you have your own proof that you appealed timely. You could also appeal by going to your local office and completing the appeal form. You can try to get a date stamped copy of the form that you're submitting. That's another way to have your own proof of when you appealed. Just the most important thing, you want to make sure whatever way you request the appeal, you keep proof of the date and the time that you did it. And that's it. This is just a really general overview of the appeals and applications process for Social Security benefits. If you have any general questions about what we went over today, feel free to drop them in the chat. And also, if you have any ideas about a topic specific to SSDI or SSI, if you want to learn about that, you can drop that. If you have any ideas, drop it in the chat also.
Awesome. So as Megan said, if anyone has a question, you need to type that in the Q&A box on Zoom or the comment section on Facebook. You cannot unmute in this forum. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. We're going to give it just a few moments here to see if any questions do come in. What are some common mental disabilities that could fall under SSDI?
See, I mean, there could really be any mental health condition that someone could get Social Security disability benefits for. Um, the main question is really if your disability, whatever condition it is, meets that disability standard that we went over in that first slide. One thing you could do if you want kind of a clearer idea is you could take a look at the um, Social Security mental listings. That's what they call it, mental listings, I think. And that is going to be on Social Security's website. And that they're going to have the criteria for how you can meet what they call a Social Security listing, which means if you meet a listing, you get approved that way, but it's not the only way that you can be approved. It's just one way you can be approved disability wise. So you can take a look at those on Social Security's website, maybe just like Google Social Security listings.
Perfect. I actually did put a link to the
Oh,
mental
great.
disorder
Thank
from the
you.
listings. Next question. Can you just go a little bit more in detail about work credits when it comes to SSDI in that
Um,
process?
I don't know how much in depth I'm going to be able to get into that, but because it's um, there's a kind of a complicated math formula involved with that. But it's really just going to be based off of how much work you have done for how long and how much you've earned. And so how much you've paid into FICA taxes that way.
Perfect. I think probably the best way to describe that. Okay. As I am not seeing any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to all of you for joining us, with a special thank you to Megan for presenting and for answering those questions. If you would like to review anything that was discussed today, we have posted a recording of today's event to our Facebook page. It will be immediately available. You can access this recording with or without a Facebook account at www.facebook.com/legalaidnc. If you would like to register for one of our other Listen and Learn programs, such as Medicaid, child custody, simple divorce, you can do so on our website at legalaidnc.org/clinics. Thank you all so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Bye.